Good evening, everybody. If you'd just like to get comfortable now, we'll get things underway. Just give you a few moments just to sit down. I know it's always annoying when someone's trying to climb over you and you're trying to watch what's going on. Thank you very much for joining us this evening at the big debate, the final event of Cooperatives United 2012. I hope you've all had a good time and managed to find out a lot about what's been going on here. There's been some fabulous exhibitions. I know I spent practically a good few hours wandering around having a look at all the different events and things going on. Now, we've got an esteemed panel, as you can see here. This is your chance to put your questions to them, and we've got a variety of topics that we're going to be covering. If you're wondering who I am, those who don't know me, my name's Steph McGovern. I present the business news on BBC Breakfast TV every morning. It's my job to get up at 3:30 every single morning, Monday to Friday. You can feel sorry for me for that. and I'm either grilling the likes of the people on this panel, or I'm out and about in various businesses around the country. It's a great way, actually, of finding out what's going on in the real economy, which I know is of great interest to our viewers. Over 7 million people watch the programme every morning, and they have become increasingly more interested about what's going on in business. And I have done some broadcasts as well from cooperative groups, and I know our viewers have always interacted very positively on that. Now, we're going to be looking at various different topics today. We're going to start on the economy. We all know it's been a tough few years. We're going to be looking at how cooperatives have done compared to the rest of the economy. Just to give you some figures on that, the cooperative economy has grown 19.6% since 2008. If you compare that to how the overall UK economy has done, it's actually, in 2011, it was 1.7% smaller than it was in 2008. So clearly the cooperative economy beating the rest of the UK on that at the moment. One of the other big problems which the economies across the world have is youth unemployment, which is something we'll be discussing as well, looking at what cooperatives can do to engage those who are struggling to find work. Recent figures from the ILO showed that young people are 3 times more likely to struggle to find work, and across the world there are 75 million young people who aren't in work at the moment. So it's something we'll also be discussing. Another contributing factor to all of this, of course, is poverty, another big issue across the world. We'll be looking at how cooperatives are helping to keep people out of poverty. Food security, there's obviously the issue of the global population growing at a fast rate at the moment. It's expected to increase to 9 billion people by 2050. So there's a big question mark over how we'll feed them all. So we'll be discussing exactly what the cooperatives can do to play a part in all of that as well. Agriculture, of course, plays into this, another big part of the cooperative movement. This year, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN declared that the theme for World Food Day would be agricultural cooperatives, the key to feeding the world. So we'll be having a bit of a chat on that. And of course, we can't get away from banking and the financial issues that have caused all the problems over the last few years. Again, we've seen the likes of Europe and America, the banking crisis there, put real pressure on the rest of the economies. And it's hard to talk about all of this without getting into politics. So we'll be looking at what cooperatives might do to help politicians or vice versa. Let me introduce you to the panel. You can see on my far right we have Shea Kian Peng, who's Chief Executive of the NTUC Fair Price Cooperative. This is Singapore's largest retailer with a network of more than 230 outlets. Now, Shea is also a member of the UN Advisory Group on the International Year of the Cooperatives and is the former chairman of Singapore National Cooperative Federation and a board member of the ICA. Next to him we have Dame Pauline Green, the President of the International Cooperatives Alliance. Before this, Dame Pauline was the CEO of Cooperatives UK and was a member of the Cooperative Commission, and before that, a cooperative member of the European Parliament. Someone should be doing a count on how many times I'm going to say the word cooperative in these biographies. Next to Dame Pauline, we have Kristen Christian, founder of the Bank Transfer Movement in the United States. This is a consumer initiative encouraging individuals to shift their banking to credit unions. This has earned Kristen several accolades, including being named one of the top 10 most inspirational women of 2011 by NBC's iVillage.com. So well done to Kristen for that. Next to me, we have Peter Marks, the Chief Executive of the Cooperative Group, the UK's largest mutual business owned by 6 million consumers. Now, Peter's worked for 50 years in the cooperative movement. Don't want to... Yeah, I just added that. I didn't want to make you feel old, but if not,
Steph, yeah.
You'll also won't be shocked to hear he's going to be retiring soon. So
Hooray!
Good luck on that. He told me he's joining a rock band earlier, so that would be something interesting to see. I should also say at this point as well, Peter does have to leave early for rock band rehearsals. So do excuse him. If you've got questions for him, try and get them in earlier if you can. Next to Peter Marks, we have Paul Hazen, who is the Executive Director of the Overseas Cooperative Development Council. Now, Paul's career in co-ops is not quite as long as Peter's, at 30 years, and it includes being President and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association, which is the US's oldest and largest national membership association representing co-ops of all types. And then finally, at the end, last but not least, Simel Asim, who is Chief of the Cooperative Branch at International Labour Organization. Now, Simel is a Turkish-American political economist who has worked in social and economic development for 20 years. So quite a lot of experience on this panel, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions for them now. I will open this out to the floor. If you do have a question, if you could just keep your hand up until the person with the microphone gets to you, that will make it a lot easier for them to spot you. So should we start with the first question? If someone wants to pop their hands up with a... I've got a gentleman on the far, so there's a lady walking towards you now. If you could just say your name and your organisation as well, and just keep it to one question, we'll get through as many as we can.
Sure.
Thank you.
Richard Dillon, and I'm in the Cooperative Group. One of the things the world seems to be lacking at the moment is noble leaders, people that inspire us. If we look at all the great wisdom traditions of the world, given that this is a global gathering, there's a teaching that there's great dignity in simplicity. So with regards to the factors that enable human flourishing, how much is enough? So it's a bit of a philosophical question, but given that we're a values-based organisation across the world, how much is enough to enable human flourishing? Thank you.
Dame Pauline, do you want to kick things off for us on that?
Well, I just think it's very... I'm just remembering what was popped into my mind as you said that, actually, was Roberto Rodriguez the other night saying that if my neighbour's unhappy, I can't be happy. And I think the fact is that and when we've got enough, it will be when everybody in the world is being properly fed clean water, decent housing, health, and we're looking at the planet as part of that. So we're not depriving or depleting the planet of everything that allows it to live too. It's a hugely ambitious agenda, and I'm only looking at it in the philosophical sense, as you've said. In the wider sense, I'm sure that Peter will come in and say, "Oh, we've got to look down at this practically," because that's what he always says when I say things like that. He told me in Quebec that I had my halo on because I was talking about the value of principles. I haven't forgiven him for it, but I think that when you're talking about what is enough, I mean, until we have solved some of the critical issues in the world, when you've got children dying in such huge numbers, then we have got a lot of work to do. And the cooperative movement, whether it's through big co-ops or small co-ops in the developing world, has a great contribution to play to make that happen.
Peter, I think it's fair to give you...
Yeah. Look, I actually agree with Pauline. I know it's a first.
Someone recorded that.
I think organisations will never, ever be able to do enough. You know, I'm a realist, and in the real world, there will always be major problems. And so, you know, the cooperative movement, I believe, is a leader in this field and needs to continue to be a leader in this field. I agree with you, by the way, in terms of a lack of inspirational leadership in politics, in the world generally. I'm treading in dangerous territory. Is there any press in the room? Because I usually get into serious trouble when I get into this area. But I agree with you. I think there's almost a leadership vacuum. Now, you know, organisations like ours has to fill that vacuum. And so we'll never, ever be able to do enough. But what we've got to do is to do as much as we can.
Paul, do you have anything you want to add to that? I see you're nodding there.
Well, I'd like to bring that down to the practical level, the local level, and I was just thinking about working in food security today. You take a farmer in Africa who has an acre of land, does not have the education or the technical assistance in order to feed themselves. But by working with their neighbors, they suddenly are able to double their production in their corn. Now they're able to feed themselves, they have a little bit extra money, and now they want more. They might want a little meat with their meal. They want to send their kids to school. So now we have to figure out what the cooperative does is can move them to that next level and keep moving them higher and higher as their needs change, as their expectations change. So I take a look at it as there's always more to do, and we're the business model that enables people to move to in order to achieve that next level that they want for themselves.
Okay, and Simel, you're also...
Yes, just a few words. At a time when we are seeing the existing economic model that is based on the supremacy of profit and competition put into question with the current crisis, it is true we all need to go back to the values of cooperation, of democracy, and co-op model does allow this, and we do need to get this co-op education, cooperative way of working into our schools from very, very early ages, I think, and for young generations also to come in through to the co-op movement.
Okay, thank you, and Cher. Yeah.
I wanted to say that, you know, beyond the rhetoric, I think it's important that cooperatives, we have a sustainable business model, and trying to balance between doing well and also doing good is a challenge. But I think this is what cooperatives are good at, and we need to focus on this and continue to do more of balancing between doing good and doing well.
Okay, and Kristen, I'll let you have a word on this.
I think I agree with everyone that there is always more work to be done, and I think most of us would kill ourselves if we focus on how much is left to do, but rather I think we accomplish the most when we find the simplicity in focusing on the task in front of us, that we can always make a difference when we do what we can, where we can, when we can.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Should we take another question from the floor? I've also got some that are being emailed in to us too. Does somebody have the hand up, or shall I?
Steph, I wonder if we could just say, I don't know if this is what you intended.
Not yet.
Now would be good.
Now,
Yes, if anyone hasn't seen the man who's just walked in.
yeah. It's important to welcome Mr. Dingley from the Nepalese movement who climbed Mount Everest for the International Year.
Looks like you're going to be a little bit hot sat there. Shout if you want some of our water. Right, should we take another question from the floor then? Did someone have that? Yes, lady at the back, microphone 3.
I'm Sally Chicken from the East of England Cooperative Society and also volunteer with credit unions. One of the great things about an event like this is the chance to see how other cooperatives work, and it makes me reflect on one of our cooperative principles, which is that cooperatives should cooperate with each other. And I just wonder if the panel could think of some kind of key performance indicator that could be measured on an annual basis so that cooperatives could actually show how they cooperate and trade with each other, because I don't think there's enough of that going on.
Okay, Samel, do you want to start with this? You do a lot of measuring of things.
I think, you know, co-op to co-op solidarity at this time is very important as we demonstrate how co-op economy is growing. We also need to remember that there are new co-ops, co-ops of marginal people, co-ops in vulnerable communities that are existing and trying to come up with innovation. And I think the fund, the Global Fund challenge is an important one, that those co-ops that can support the smaller co-ops in their innovation, in their growth, that would be an important indicator. And financial co-ops to support other co-ops, co-ops in other sectors, and would be an important indicator.
Peter.
Well, again, I'll make myself very unpopular, but I've spent pretty much all of my 45 years in the cooperative movement in the UK trying to talk cooperatives into merging with each other, to consolidate, because most of my career, the cooperative movement in the UK has been in serious decline. Unfortunately, we have consolidated, and as a result of that, we are now in renaissance. You know, I've said many times, we call it the cooperative movement, but in the UK, it very rarely cooperated and didn't move. Now it is changing because of consolidation. But on a positive level, only this morning, I was at a meeting of European chief executives of cooperatives, and we were talking about just that thing, whether we can form an alliance to purchase products better and therefore help us to compete more effectively. So I agree with you, but I've always felt, and you won't agree with me here, East of England, but I've always felt that consolidation in the consumer cooperative in the UK, maybe different elsewhere in the world, that is the best way of being able to do what my colleague at the far end has said, commercially be successful, so that we can fulfill our social goals.
Peter, if I could just interject, you'll be happy to note that during this last few days, a couple of my colleagues from Singapore were here. We did have some good discussions with your chaps in cooperatives group, and I hope that in a few months' time we could see more trade between us.
That's worthy of a round of applause.
Just to say that I think if this international year has given the movement anything, it has given it a growing sense of cohesion. Not that that necessarily means co-op to co-op trade straight away, but the movement is much more aware of its own size, its own significance, and the security it gets from having this huge network of independent, autonomous, sovereign cooperatives across the world who all believe in the same thing, who all pursue the same principles and objectives. And I think the movement has been empowered by that, actually. And it's gained in confidence, and I've seen it across the year. So I hope the sort of things that you've seen that's positively come out of this event, such as Kian Peng was saying and Peter Marks is saying, I think they're tremendous. And I've heard people saying that they've been doing trade here. I think that's what we need. If we're going to garner the energy from our movement and our businesses, because we're all businesses, if we're going to garner the energy from that to help us develop what the pioneers called the cooperative commonwealth, to build the movement across the world, then we really do need to keep the momentum of this year going and not let it disappear, not let it just sort of drift away from us when the year ends. And the sort of initiative Peter's just talked about, bringing together the consumer cooperative chief officers, is absolutely what we must do.
Okay. Should we take another question? Microphone 2. This will be, yes. Thank you.
My name is Ray Howell, Jamaica. In Jamaica, the cooperative, the credit union movement is very strong. But for the other cooperatives, they are weak. Looking at the film last night, one see where out of the Rochdale Pioneer, just over 160 years, we have over 1 billion members. To my mind, this is the fastest growing organization which involves cut across cultural, political, economic, social lines. No other organization, I think, have grown that fast in our history. Notwithstanding, my organization, Tip Friendly Society, is the only member of ICA in Jamaica and the Caribbean. What initiatives are we putting in place to ensure that the message gets to a wider cross-section in other places?
Okay, so initiatives that are being put in place. Shay, do you want to start on this?
As a philosophy, I always believe that it's always good to start with small steps. And big ideas start small. So I feel that, you know, in the respective countries, there will be several barriers, several hurdles, but if we can get things going initially first, and I also don't believe in forcing trade to happen. You cannot force business to happen, but you need to be good at whichever sector you're in, you need to be good at it first. And when that happens, the ability to then grow will be there. And therefore, I will just go back to basics. Do your basics better, do your basics well, and you know, you will be one step closer to growing your cooperative and growing your business.
Kristen, you took quite an ambitious step when you set up the bank transfer movement. What else do you think, what other initiatives do you think could be done to encourage more?
Well, in the US, the initiative I'm working on currently is what I believe is the next evolution of the bank transfer day movement in the United States. Consumers have proven what they want as far as their options for banking services and other services. The next logical step to me was to have these consumers who are also voters let their representatives know that if our representatives are not supporting legislation that supports communities and are holding cooperatives back from, you know, being able to fully serve these communities, then quite frankly, I don't care how much, you know, they're able to rake in campaign contributions, but they need our votes, and without that support, they will not get our votes.
Okay, Paul, do you want to follow that?
I think we have the greatest example probably in the world of how do we raise our profile and make ourselves known right here with the cooperative group and what they've done with their branding. From a U.S. perspective, they're a great model. The electric co-ops in the United States, 1,000 co-ops, 42 million members, branded themselves as Touchstone Energy. And I felt it was the greatest cooperative education program in the country, while it was a marketing program, but what it did is educate more people about why these cooperatives are different and why they're community-based, and you can trust them because the neighbors run them. So it was blending that cooperative message and what we do well into the advertising that was both good marketing for the electric co-ops, but then also, and good business, but then also raised the profile for all the other types of cooperatives that weren't as well known.
Okay, should we take another question? Yes, gentleman down at the front, microphone 1.
I'm Virendra Singh from India, Chairman of the National Consumers Federation. Very simple question I would like to ask. Why the cooperative movements are generally generally not successful in the underdeveloped economies? What are the action plan of our leaders, like Madam ICA Chief or other leaders, to make this cooperative functional? Because in this booklet also, you'll find in every sector, you'll find either USA, Canada, Germany, UK, they are the leaders. So why these underdeveloped economies, cooperatives are not successful?
Okay, Dame Pauline.
Well, first of all, it's not that they're unsuccessful. I think you will find some Indian co-ops in that list. I think the reason that the number of co-ops from the more traditional co-op countries are predominant is because they were the ones that started first, and so they've built scale, like the Cooperative Group, like some of the big co-ops in the US and other parts of Europe. So I think there are, and certainly if you look at cooperatives like IFCO, then you will know that these are cooperatives that are growing very rapidly and spreading around the world. And I am absolutely confident that some of the thrusting, striving cooperatives we see in the developing world will be in that list in the coming years. So I'm not at all concerned that currently they are from the countries in which cooperation started earlier. I think that's pretty normal, and I would say just watch this space because they're catching up.
Peter, you want to talk to that?
Well, cooperatives have failed very recently in the UK. Most of my career, and I've spent it all with the cooperative movement in the UK, it's been in decline, serious decline. And the reason for that is it hasn't acted commercially enough. It's been inefficient, incoherent in the way it's marketed itself, and up against very successful, big, efficient businesses in food retailing, like, for instance, Tesco, Asda, Walmart, we haven't been able to compete, largely because, for most of that time, we have been fragmented. So lots of different small community co-ops, which were great years ago and could compete. When I started in the late 60s, we had a 25% market share in the UK of food. A few years ago, 2006-07, it got down to 4%, and it was declining. So we weren't strong enough, we weren't commercial enough. We were great at ethics, great at values and principles, but we'd forgotten that we need to make profit to succeed. Now that we've changed that because of consolidation, I mentioned it earlier, but we can't be complacent. We still have to compete, and it's tough. So, you know, I try to preach balancing being commercial, but also being social responsible, and it's a tough balance. It is a very tough balance. But unless we're commercial and we continue to make profit, we will not be able to fulfill our social goals because we won't exist.
Paul.
I think an important part of this issue is an enabling environment for cooperatives. If you take a look at our experience in the United States, we got it right, especially for rural America, where the financing was available, technical assistance was available, good laws, so that people could organize themselves into businesses. And I think that's the lesson, the blueprint that the ICA has put out has highlighted that, the need for good laws around the world that enable cooperatives to form and to get to the size and scale they need to compete in a global market. There has to be access to capital so that they can, again, react quickly. We have a model of generating capital that is inefficient. We can't go around and gather up bits of capital from members or wait until we have enough retained earnings in order to compete on a global basis. We have to figure out how to access more capital that I think will then help cooperatives around the world, but especially in the developing world. And Mr. Flowers is down here, and he's going to kill me if I don't mention the Global Development Cooperative, which is an initiative of the ICA and being supported by the Co-op Bank here in the UK, which I think will be a key tool in order to help cooperatives in the developing world.
Okay, then Pauline, I know you wanted to...
Yeah, I just wanted to come back a bit on what Peter said. You won't be surprised to know. He's right about the movement in the UK being in decline. I don't think we were good at our values and principles then. I don't think we were good at anything then. We weren't good at our managing, we weren't good at our board, our governance, and we certainly weren't good at our principles and values. Because to be able to pursue your principles and values well, you've got to have a good cooperative business. Otherwise, you can't do it. So I would say that we were failing on all counts, Peter, that we weren't good at anything, and that was because we'd become apathetic and we're trying to compete with our competitors. This is the other argument you can make, on the price of baked beans and not on the value of our community engagement. So now that you've changed all that round, it's fine.
If I could just make some comments. My cooperative is 40 years next year. In Singapore, as you know, it's a very open economy, and we have big players in the consumer business coming to Singapore. But I think we have done relatively well. We are the market leader there. And no offense to my friends from France, but Carrefour just announced that they're pulling out. We have big players who come in and moved out, but we have been able to hold our own. I want to make the point that I think we have been able to hold our own because, number one, I think we run our business fairly well, fairly efficiently. And at the same time, I think we have been able to portray and build trust with the public at large and our customers and our members, that they know that shopping in our cooperative is a brand you can trust, you get value for money, and we are doing a lot of good to the community. I think these are things which makes a difference, because you highlight the values beyond just low prices. What is that dollar going to? What does your cooperative believe in? What does shopping in our cooperative versus shopping in a Carrefour or others, what does it mean? If you're able to do these two well, I think then you are on the road of able to get a decent market share, and with good market share, you are then able to create significant social impact, significant value to the public at large, to your members. And that is what being a cooperative is all about. Okay. And it's a sustainable model.
Let's take the question from microphone 3 at the back there. So, yes, in the middle.
Hello, my name is Roberto Cardinale from Lega Coop, and I have a question for my board, ICA board. First of all, thank you for organizing this event, because it's an incredible occasion, and I found that the organization was just perfect. I was really moved by it. Thank you so much. And my question is this, but I have a perception, and I will be not so nice in this, that sometimes it's about talking among each other, among cooperatives, okay? In Venice, I don't know who was in Venice, the International Congress was really boring. And I'm Italian, so...
A little bit harsh.
And I'm so sorry about that, because I find that this year was an occasion in order to tell people who are not in the cooperative movement what's a cooperative. So, thank you. So I would like to know what my board thinks about this. If there's the same perception in your country about what was International Year of Cooperatives, and if there is a strategy, a branding strategy in this, with a non-violent communication, because we have to talk to people in order for them to understand what we're talking about. Because it's extremely difficult to talk about values in this era. We're in the digital era. So I would like to ask you, my representative. Thank you.
Well done.
Branding strategy.
Well, first of all, to be fair to Euryxie in Venice, it was a research conference. It wasn't designed to be a great big woo. And if you looked at the events in Quebec City, if you looked at this event, these were the ones that were really external facing. And I want to say, you paid tribute to the ICA, but frankly, the tributes for the organisation of this really ought to go to the Co-op Group and Co-ops UK, because they have done all on-the-ground organising in a very, very detailed way. But I also do want to say that we had begun a process of rebranding the ICA after the ICA came under new management, if you see what I mean, in 2009 when our board was elected. We stopped because the International Year came and produced the logo and slogan. We didn't want to compete with a new one for the ICA in that. What this has shown us is the importance and the cohesiveness that's come from this year, and we are very much into, and our communications team, which is headed by Ed Mayo down here, is very much into looking now about how we take this momentum and cohesion forward in the context of branding. So we're on the job.
Okay, thank you. Question from down at the front now.
My name is Norman Chipakpaku from the Cooperative College in Manchester. This question is actually, I'm asking it as an African who's lived in the UK for a long time. What are the cooperators thinking about the contribution of the African diaspora who are all over the world, who are remitting billions of dollars back to Africa every year, and at the same time are being ripped off by companies like Western Union? And these Africans want to contribute to Africa's development. These Africans want to be part of the cooperative movement, and some of us, I have been a member of the cooperative movement for over 40 years as well. I think next to Peter. So what do the cooperators, especially the financial cooperatives, think they can do to try and harness these remittances to Africa and stop the Africans being ripped off, but at the same time to use the savings which we have to try and build and create jobs in Africa?
Paul, and then I'll let someone else start.
I'll take a shot at it, but there are quite a bit of migrant workers cooperative initiatives, not just African, but also Asian workers, migrant workers, own cooperatives to be able to invest back home, whether these are of the saving and credit nature, whether it is for housing purposes or for scholarships or to invest back in businesses back home. I think there are good models of migrant workers themselves taking it into their own hands to do this.
Okay, Paul, do you want to make any comments on this?
Well, I mentioned it before, the Global Development Cooperative, I think, is a mechanism where cooperatives and their members can invest money to make strategic investments in Africa. And I think that's the real key, that you have to have the expertise in order to make these investments, and we have that in the cooperative movement. And so the Development Cooperative provides the mechanism for investment from around the world into Africa. And so I see that as a key, and if we can get that right, it can be a model for not only Africa, but other places in the world, and for other sectors of the economy that would like to try to invest in community-based, value-based businesses in Africa, perhaps the labor movement and others that would see this as a positive way to build up Africa.
Okay. Number 4 at the back. I know you've been holding that up for a long time now.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
My question, I think, goes back to the one raised by Paul Hazen earlier on about access to capital for cooperatives. Now, there are two issues, I think, well, three. One is that governments and sovereign debt are pretty much bankrupt, and there's hardly no money there. And individuals have a huge overhang of debt equally. Our credit cards are maxed out. However, corporate Britain and corporate Europe and corporate America have huge walls of money, and they don't know how to invest it, or they're afraid to invest it because they may lose it. How could the cooperative world encourage that huge wall of corporate money to get active and get the economy of the world moving?
Okay, Peter, do you want to?
Well, Paul is right, you're right about the cooperative movement's access to capital. It's a real challenge. We have only two ways of developing our business. One is generating profit to reinvest, and the other is debt. We are looking at innovative ways of accessing the capital markets through saying to our members, would you like to invest in our business? And we are right now almost ready to launch a member certificate. We have an organisation called the Financial Services Authority who are difficult to please at the moment. So we have to be, and don't print that if Corp News are in the room. We have to wade through that kind of treacle, which we're doing at the moment. So we do have to find innovative ways to raise capital. I honestly can't think of how we can entice, whether it's American corporates or any corporates around the world, to invest in our business, because you know, investors invest, although we actually access the bond markets. So, you know, we have quite a diverse, the cooperative group has quite a diverse capital raising. So we have bank debt, but we also have the bond markets as well. But investors only invest for a return. And you're right about risk. At the moment, the economy is in a terrible state globally, and that's why companies are hanging on to their surpluses, because they have no confidence right now in the short to medium term economic future. And I'm not sure that the cooperatives can unlock that right now.
Paul, did you want to add to that?
Well, in my previous job, I spent about 10 years of my life trying to sort this out, and we didn't get the answer that the movement thought that we could move forward. But I still have some thought, some hope. The largest co-op in the United States is CHS Inc. It's a large agricultural cooperative with over $30 billion in annual turnover. They regularly have a preferred share offering on the stock exchange. It's always oversubscribed. Most of the stock is purchased. This is non-voting stock, preferred shares. Most of the stock is purchased by the members because they see this business as important to them, important to their daily livelihood, and it's a darn good investment for them. So I think that's an interesting model for us to look at. You know, depending upon rules and regulations by our government in the United States, it only makes sense for large cooperatives, but that may not be the case around the world. But I do think there's a class of investors out there that we call impact investors in the United States, who have not only, they're looking for an economic return, but looking for a social impact. And I do think there is potential for us to appeal to that type of investor. It may not be a corporate, might be a corporation, but it might more likely be an individual. And to access that kind of capital, I think perhaps provides an opportunity.
Okay. Did you want to add to that, Kristen?
Actually, I just want to bring up a counterpoint, something to consider. Actually, this came up on the Bank Transfer Day page today, and there was quite a bit of outrage over the idea of corporations having an involvement in financial cooperatives. That's something that consumers in America are apparently very fearful of, that the idea of a corporation coming in and investing in a financial cooperative, I think, leaves consumers with a feeling that they would then lose that democratic control. So it actually was, squashed, and quite a few very knowledgeable very knowledgeable people did come in and kind of explain, one share, one vote, you're fine, don't worry about it. But there was quite a bit of initial concern, and so as somebody, looking at it from the outside and, sort of viewing it from the consumer's perspective, I would caution financial cooperatives to tread lightly in that area and actually, take that route of maybe, looking at larger individual investors, or, in California we have B corporations or organizations that have a more sustainable approach, but I would be very careful with the word corporation in general.
Pauline. Yeah, I just want to agree with Kristen. I know this is a really important issue. There is a serious development a need for development capital in the cooperative movement. But as it says in the blueprint, one of the areas that we want to investigate in much greater detail and develop strategies for and look and see how we can find a solution to this. But we have to make sure that whatever we do, and it shouldn't be beyond the wit of man to find a way of creating development capital for cooperatives that does not jeopardize member ownership. And that's the critical issue. And there's too much evidence already of bits of the movement that went for some sort of corporate engagement and are no longer in existence as a result of that. There's too much evidence of that, and we have to be very careful. There's plenty of patient capital now. It's not plenty. It's a small sector of the financial market, but it's growing, and people who are prepared to invest in ethical businesses. We have to try and find other ways and other financial vehicles, perhaps innovative ones, to solve this problem. And it's one of the things we've already started discussions on.
Okay. Do we take the question from microphone 3 now?
Well, I'd like to thank the ICA and Cooperatives UK for this wonderful event, and especially for the opportunities I got here to meet people and colleagues from other places in the world. My name is Ifat Solel. I'm from Israel, and I got the opportunity to meet here cooperative members from Iran, and especially I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to meet a very important colleague of mine from Palestine, which we just met, and we're going to collaborate in the future from now on. We had a huge social protest in Israel last summer. We had 500,000 people on the streets, out of 7 million, by the way. And out of this huge protest emerged a new cooperative movement. People were sitting in tent encampments and were learning about other possibilities of how to create economy, how to deal with economical issues. And we've established several new cooperatives. I've been working with more than 40 groups in the past year. We are now going to start a new alliance, the Cooperative Alliance for Social, Economic and Environmental Justice. And I wanted to ask about connections between the cooperative movement and the social protests around the world, because I feel like it's the obvious solution for all those people who are protesting in the streets.
Okay, so... Kristen, connections between the social movements and what we're seeing with the cooperative?
I would agree with you fully. That's actually why I started Bank Transfer Day, that I saw, these people standing in the street complaining and then pointing out the issues. And at least in the United States, when I saw my fellow men doing that, it frustrated me. Because, like you, I saw that, here's this very clear solution. Why are we discussing the problem and not the solution? And when I travel to so many different countries and speak to people who come from different backgrounds, religions, ethnicities, speak different languages, it's the same. It's the same mission across the board. We all want to help people help themselves. And that's why cooperatives mean so very much to me, because I think it is going to be the mission that turns all of this around and sets so much right that is currently wrong.
Peter.
Yes, Steph, I have to go shortly, so my apologies. But I would link that comment, question, observation to, in a strange way, to Roberto. Two young people there. I'm old, you know. We do tend to be boring. We do tend to look inwardly, and I think that's what we've tried to do this week. Open it up to the general public. We've had, someone remind me, about 7,000, 8,000 people from the general public in Manchester here looking around and understanding what the co-op's all about.
10,000.
10,000, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.
This morning I was on a panel talking to some of my senior management team, and we had a professor from Manchester University, an Italian, who was saying to us, look, you know, if you want to get your message across, you need to use education because students don't understand you. And we have to make ourselves more relevant to young people. And we're not, because we tend to be boring, you know, boring conferences. We've got to be more relevant. We've got to get into schools. The film that we premiered last night about the history is a fantastic story. But nobody knows about it. You know, the school kids need to know that story. And then maybe, and it will take some time, that might form the solution. Thank you.
Samel.
Just also about alliance building. Roberto was saying how, you know, we tend to talk among ourselves for the co-op movement, and perhaps there is also the need, the urge to explain oneself to the adversaries. But then in this time, there is a lot of different movements, the sustainable development movement, women's movement, trade unions, business associations, where everybody is struggling. And so these are actually allies that are looking for questioning the firm, questioning the enterprise models that are out there. And the enterprise governance model, a democratic model that young people in the streets are also protesting about, is something that needs to be explained to those that are natural potential allies. It's people who can just jump the fence and join.
Thank you. Sheikh Yanpeng, how do you think that cooperatives engage more young people and make it more relevant?
Certainly we need to stay relevant, and making use of social media is important. You know, we need to evolve and keep up with the times, and ensuring we are able to engage, to communicate, especially to the young, is important. Otherwise, the cooperative movement would lose its relevance, and we are aging quite rapidly, and it's more important that we plow more resources into engaging the young, and therefore social media is a must.
And that's exactly what you did, use social media, Kristen.
Absolutely. I think as far as really engaging the youth, I see two things that can come from a dialogue, and I think a dialogue is going to be what's really beneficial to the cooperative movement for the present and for the future. And of that dialogue, what I would personally like to see is, one, the current leaders coming to these young people. I mean, look around you. Look at how many young people are here. This is how much they care, that they want to take a part in this. Ask them what ideas they have and listen to what they have to say for the current model of reaching them and pulling in new consumers and new members. And then furthermore, offer them your wisdom and experience. And I know I'll prattle on about this over and over and over, but really, there's so much wisdom that you have from dedicating your lives to the cooperative movement. And we really need to learn that experience. If you ever hope to retire someday, we're not going to let you leave if you don't give us your experience first.
Okay, thank you. Should we take one from number 2, microphone 2?
Hello, my name's Ian Hewitt. I'm from Nottingham, which is a principality in the middle of the country. And I wonder, I've really enjoyed today. I've come by Co-op Group Coach, and I've got to go back shortly. But I've really enjoyed today. But I think an outreach, a useful outreach from this fabulous event and from the ones that have happened throughout the year might be some sort of communique to the world that said that the product of the International Year of Cooperation is a vision that the globe can get hold of. And I'd point to the point that Dame Pauline made, the image or the vision from the past that my daughter gave to me in a cartoon or a image from 1905 with a Mayday image from the Trades Council in London, I think, or the TUC, which had got a picture of a woman holding a torch. And the torch had a ball, which was the cooperative, the cooperative Commonwealth, that's the word, Commonwealth, cooperative Commonwealth. She was bound up, she was entrapped by a big snake, which was the constriction of capitalism. And she was holding a torch with the cooperative Commonwealth. Now, I think we need to, from this International Year of Cooperatives, we need an image that reaches out around the world and shows what we're aiming at, beyond the practical, but the vision and the direction. So can we have a communique and suggest the Commonwealth as a really nice model?
It sounds like that should be a competition. Everyone get their pens out and start drawing one. Dame Pauline, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I just think that I know what you're saying. We need something that continues where we've got to now. And I think that's the critical thing. We've got to continue the momentum. And we've been driving for the blueprint for a cooperative decade as the next cohesive element that the movement can take on board. Because it's our view, and it's certainly the ICA board's view, that although it's ambitious, it's perfectly possible that by 2020, the cooperative movement should be the fastest growing business model in the world. All the mood music is right out there for us. We've had this year, which has given us the most tremendous boost. We've had people like Kristen doing what she's done and has made a huge impact on the world. And we just need to keep doing those sort of things and keep driving. And I think if we do that, we don't need the same sort of vision that was right for the 19th century. We need something that's right for now, which is much more about contacting people, going viral over the social media networks and making it work for us. Because one of the things we've done with young people, and we must be really careful about, is we've tend to sort of put them in a corner and say, they're the young people, we've got to let them have their say, and we'll give them 5 minutes to come and tell us about it at the end of a conference. Whereas what we need is to have them integrated into this event. We need to have panels of young people with all of us sitting there listening to them. So we've got to start changing that perception if we're serious about wanting to drive this great movement forward and handing it over to the next generation and what they do for their own communities rather than what we think they ought to do. So I think that's the message. It's got to be visionary. I don't think it needs to be sort of one strong visual image, but I think it needs to be a strong vision.
Kristen, as the youngest person on the panel, do you agree with Dame Pauline?
Absolutely, and I think I can speak for most people in my generation to say we are so fortunate that people like you are so rare outside of, I hate to call this an industry. I think that's such an ugly word to describe it, but you don't find this anywhere else, that to find people who really are willing to listen to us, not just say, go on and speak, but they actually do listen to the words we have to say and the ideas we have. It's just absolutely incredible, and everywhere I've traveled, I find at least 1 or 2 people like this who really do want to listen to our ideas and understand that I don't think most of us are ready to take over just yet, but if we do hope to someday, we will need to ease into the water.
Okay, thank you. Should we take one right at the back? Microphone 3.
Hello there. My name is Captain Chaos. I'm a resident of Manchester, and my organisation is the Manchester Energy Generation Association. My question is, for the 46 years that I've lived in Manchester, I have apparently been involved in a co-op which calls itself Manchester City Council. 1 member, 1 vote, 1 electorate, 1 vote. And as an organisation, Manchester City Council is now more closely calling itself a cooperative and restricting the development of cooperatives in its local authority by the use of the power, the influence, the authority and the finances and the assets it has. So is it possible that local authorities could join the cooperative movement and actually be fully fledged co-ops, or are they just guising themselves and restricting co-ops generally, but because they think they're better?
Okay, good question. Dame Pauline, do you think local authorities can join the cooperative movement?
Well, I think certainly some of the initiatives I've seen from, just this week, what was it, cheaper fuel to the people, with Manchester City Council trying to pull all its local authorities together into and all the people within them into a cooperative, so that they can buy power from one of the energy suppliers at a much cheaper price because of the volume they will attract, which is great. And I think the more they do of that, the better. Of course, they've also got to make sure that they're buying greener energy. And they're looking after the environment as well. But if you've got a large group of ordinary people who's saying, yeah, we'll go with this, we'll join, then I think you've got a greater chance of persuading them and encouraging them, and perhaps even following what they want, which is actually to do something to preserve the planet. So I think local authorities have got a lot to offer in terms of becoming part of the co-op movement. I do, yes.
Okay, thank you. Should we take a question from number 1, the back? Okay.
Thanks. I'm going to ask about trade unions, and in some part, the trade unions were born from some of the same needs that we were as cooperatives, and now we see in many places a decline of the trade union movement and attacks on trade unions. And there are some notable exceptions in the room where our movement does have a clear partnership and a role with the trade unions. And I know that with the ILO, the ICA has worked in partnership with trade unions in a few specific cases. But my question is, if we're going to take a blueprint for a cooperative decade and say sustainability is something that we're going to push back and say this is something that we need to be a leader in, is it important for us to also look to the decline of trade unions? Is it important for us to build a partnership? And does that happen with ICA, or does that happen somewhere else?
Okay, thank you. Paul, do you want to start us on that?
Yeah, I think Kirsten's asking us for wisdom and our experience. You know, I think what you're referring to, Tom, is, you know, the cooperative movement has had a lot of allies over the years that have spurred and helped our development. Trade unions, farmer organizations are 2 good examples around the world. Religious institutions, you know, who said, we're out here fighting for, in case of trade unions and farmers, their members, wanting a more just economy and society, the religious institutions. And unfortunately, I think around the world, we've lost a lot of those relationships and development of common agendas and common visions. I think, and that's for a lot of reasons. I think the challenge for us now and the opportunity is to find, as my colleague here said earlier, building the relationships with groups today that are on the cutting edge of change and who believe that there's another way to structure our economy for the benefit of all the people. We participated in a fair trade conference today. I mean, that's just such a natural ally, the fair trade movement, and I know there's been a lot of work done here in the UK on that, but looking for those is where we have to go, in my view.
Samel, do you think it's about those relationships?
In the history of, I think, co-op movement and labor movement, they come from very much the same place. And it was a time of crisis, and there has been divergences, but I think the affinities always remained. And there was, as you indicated, until very recently, an ICA, ITUC, International Trade Union Confederation, and ILO Red Alliance. And I think it is important for that alliance to be rebuilt. Today, in a discussion on informal economy workers in the informal economy, the discussion was very much about the importance of membership-based institutions and the principles and values that we keep coming back to, the cooperative principles, are critical to informal workers and their organizations. And trade unions and co-ops can do this side by side. Trade unions can provide, encourage establishment of co-ops among their members. And there are co-ops whose unions are actually members of trade unions, national trade unions, like in the case of SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association of India. It is about bringing that alliance back to the forefront, and we are getting a lot of requests for worker co-ops in the transition, in the bankruptcies of firms, the transfer of the company to the worker ownership. This is something. There are ministries forming around us in Europe. I think the time of this alliance has come. ILO's constitution says, consult with employers' organizations, trade unions, cooperatives, and their movements and their international organizations. We just need to get back to it and do it.
Thank you. We've got time for about 3 more questions. I know there's 2 there, and there's a gentleman who's had his hand up as well down there. If someone could get a mic to him at some point. Should we start with number 4?
Oh, good afternoon. My name's Leslie Freitag. I'm a co-op group member, elected member, and the question is a little bit more mundane and general, but on the platform we've got cooperatives, we've got cooperative alliance, different typeface, we've got plain co-op without hyphen, we've got 3 or 4 down the bottom, the UN inflicted one on us, the ICA has no connection with the word. Is it not time we had a global co-op logo? With or without the hyphen, we can bend a little bit, I think. If you think of companies like Esso and BP, you're thinking, no, it stands for British Petroleum, but it doesn't. But you know what it is. The UN, the EU, Disney, Coca-Cola, Tesco, of course, unfortunately. Ford, they've had the same logo since the 30s, since they first started making cars. We have a disparate image across the world, even across this conference. You go around here, sometimes you can't find the word on the literature. In Malaysia, it's hidden in a long, long word. You get my drift. Is it not time to have this logo, whatever it is, and agreed on every single building, bank, taxi, boat, hotel, wherever we're operating, you have that badge. If you don't have that badge, you're not a cooperative. Okay. Then, as Pauline suggested, we wouldn't be seen just as a small, medium enterprise, but something very big on the B20 and even the G20. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a bit like Ian's comment on having a vision, I guess, and an image. So should there be one logo?
Well, I think there's a need for us to have an identifier that says this is a cooperative, part of the global cooperative movement. I have to say that we do not have a global brand. We are not a Microsoft or a Nike or whatever. And my view is we don't want to be, because actually every cooperative in the world is local, autonomous, sovereign, and has been built up by local people for local people. And I think we need to be different. We are different. And I think we're this vast network across the world. And when we talk about our brand, it's not actually about trying to be a monolithic corporation. or to sell a single product or service. For us, it's something much more profound. It's actually about a different sort of business. It's about putting people at the heart of economic decision-making and not leaving them at its mercy. And we have to argue for that. That's what cooperatives are, that's what we stand for. And if we've got something that can superimpose brands and say, you know, cooperatives worldwide building a better world, great. I mean, that's perfect. But I wouldn't want to say to everybody, you've all got to use exactly the same brand for your own products, but simply that you're part of the cooperative family in the world. In that sense, I think we need an identifier, like a kite mark or something that's very clearly something we can all subscribe to. You try and even put the same in one country or one region, try and get the same brand, and you're there forever trying to do that. Let's just worry about picking something that says who we are, that isn't about trying to say we're all one business, because we're not. And that's what the modern iteration of branding and imagery is. And we have to move away from that. We are not that. We're something different. And our model is about something much more profound and important. It's about human beings at the centre of the economic world.
Kristen, I can see you wanting to add to that.
Yeah, well, I agree fully with that. From a consumer perspective, one of the things that drove me so wild about financial cooperatives that I took to Facebook in that way was the fact that they are autonomous, that they adapt to serve their individual communities in a way that this larger brand can never do. That said, I think that identifying cooperatives in some way with the thing that immediately came to mind while you were speaking was actually the vegan branding or fair trade that there's but what instantly popped in my mind was that green V, that when people see that, they know this is a product that does not contain animal products and was, you know, ethically created. So I think coming up with some sort of symbol in that way that cooperatives could autonomously choose to incorporate into their own individual branding, but are not forced to, I think that would be very beneficial to the cooperative movement.
Yeah.
Okay, let's. We've got time just for those two last questions. The gentleman at the front.
Thanks. Thank you, Robin Cherney from Cult Group again. Somewhere in amongst this, I think, there's a fundamental education issue. The business teachers in schools particularly, but also elsewhere, will teach the conventional wisdom always, and then if I may say so, Steph, the journalists and the representation on the breakfast programme, whatever, you know, interested what you might have to say about the way the bias is the same. You know, not often that we see anything other than the miserable old sod who criticises anything unless it's defending the, you know, the right of the commercial organisations to be free to rip us all off as much as they like. But no, in the business schools and the college, whether it's in the colleges, in FE colleges or wherever, and particularly in schools, secondary schools, we should find a way, perhaps Sheffield Hallam distance learning arrangement might do it, something like that, to actually get the message across early on about the efficacy and all the rest of it, of the cooperative model in business.
So the perception. Paul, do you want to give your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. We need to do that, and I think we should maybe build upon our strength of local grassroots organizations to build those relationships with educational institutions. I think too many times you kind of have a top-down theory. Okay, let's get something that all the universities can use and everything will be great. I think I'd rather, you know, should be on the agenda. The cooperative movement is let's build these relationships that then it's just a natural that of course we want to teach about this type of business that's so vital to our community. That's I think where we should put our emphasis on trying to integrate the cooperatives into the curriculum.
It's not just business schools, though, is it? I mean, it's the economics, it's the law schools, it's those who are doing the legal advice. You know, it's those judges that are sitting at the bankruptcy trials. It's across the board, and it is also in technical education and vocational training institutions, more non-formal institutions, from even elementary school, cooperative way of thinking, of working.
And from the media perspective, I think one of the biggest criticisms I get is when if I do a gloomy news story, as there are so many of them at the moment, people say, you know, you're always doing gloomy stories. Then when I do positive stories, people moan at me that I'm not reflecting the reality of how tough it is for other people. I think, though, I mean, one of my main missions, I can't speak for the whole of the media, but my main missions on Breakfast is to try and just show as much as possible of what's going on, trying to visit as many businesses as possible and get their voices out, because I think it's those people who tell the stories much better often than the pundits or the business leaders who we sometimes have in the studio. But, should we take the final question from number 2?
Yeah, my name's Sean Tarbuck. I'm the Chief Executive of the International Cooperative and Mutual Insurance Federation, the sector body for the ICA. As I agree with all of you, we've had a great year in cooperatives cooperating with each other. Most of my job these days is trying to externalize that message out to everyone else. So my question really is for you, Steph. I deal with the media a lot.
Yep.
We've had The Economist here this week for the first time ever showing an interest in our particular form of governance. How is it we're going to crack organizations like the BBC to actually talk about us as a positive organization, a positive show for force? Because
the spotlight is suddenly on
it's so difficult to get into the media.
Yeah.
All we've had here is The Guardian this week.
Yes.
We've not had the FT here. We've not had anyone else.
Yeah.
You're on our doorstep. Why haven't the BBC been here interviewing these wonderful leaders? Sorry to be like that, but
yeah, I'm glad I fitted in this last question.
You are great on the TV in the morning. I do watch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I have been in quite a few cooperatives. I think the reason probably why I'm even here today hosting this is because I've done lots of work with Ed and recently broadcast from a bakery which was offering bread bonds, and I was showing that as an alternative. So how you can invest money in the business, say £2,000, you get that £2,000 back in 2 years, and every week you get a loaf of bread sent to you. I mean, that was an easy story to sell to the nation because it's interesting, isn't it? The idea of getting bread sent every week. That's the difficulty I have is making it colourful every morning so that people do take an interest in it, because every single day I get about 100 emails from businesses saying, why don't you come to my business and show what it's like here and how we're working? And I have a long list of them. Many of them are the cooperatives, so I try and do as many as possible. The problem is I can't do the cooperative story every week. And so kind of every few months is what I've been doing at the moment. So I've done the bread bonds. I've done a pub in Cumbria. We have the Peter Marks. I've interviewed Peter several times as well. In terms of how you're going to sell it to the media, sell it as, if I was your PR person, I would say, give us a colourful top line and we will do the story. And so it's not necessarily about about us not doing the cooperative movement. It's more about you just selling yourself as a business, and then we will be more interested in it. I hope that answers it. I can't speak for the whole media, but yes, it is. I've already been sat here thinking myself, why didn't we get Kristen on the programme this week to talk about that? I think as well, we probably didn't know enough about what was going on, because I think she would have been a fabulously inspirational person to have on. I struggle to get female business women on the programme as well. That's one of my big beefs. So, you know, if any of you do want to be on telly and talk about your businesses, do pitch your stories as I leave. Try and keep your pitch down to 30 seconds. Then you'll maintain my interest. But yeah, no, I agree with you. We need to do more. And I think think on that note, we should probably end proceedings. I hope you've all enjoyed that. I know I certainly have. There's been a variety of views there. We are slightly behind schedule, so I'm going to introduce David Button, who is Chair of the Cooperatives UK, to come up, because I believe you've got a final few words to say, and so it's Dame Pauline, I believe. So if you could welcome up David Button for us now, that would be great. Thank you.
Right, glasses. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Have you all had a great time? Yes. Marvellous. I was asked to keep my comments very short, so I prepared a small 25-page document, which should only take about an hour. So if you'd like to sort of settle down a bit, I'll try and work my way through it. On Wednesday, I was delighted to welcome you all here. And I said that Cooperatives UK was going to be a fantastic event, a momentous event for us all. And perhaps that was an understatement. Do you agree? Yes. You're very good, aren't you? You want to go home, don't you? That's the problem. Inspirational, full of energy, enthusiastic, motivating, some of the words used to describe this event. And also Ed Mayo, by the way. Well, you've got to, haven't you? I mean, you've got to keep him in the limelight. Anyway, from the incredible expo, the keynote speeches, workshops, congress, and don't forget next year we're in Cardiff, 28th to the 30th of June, so I'm told. The ICA General Assembly, various forums, fringe events, etc. But perhaps for me, because I like kids, I've got grandchildren, the young generation who performed out there, I think they are the people who are going to take us forward into the future. So I enjoyed that. There's been something for everybody. But certainly, although it's been, great though it's been, we can all certainly be pleased with ourselves, perhaps. But the action we take over the next decade and the implementation of the Cooperative Blueprint will really determine the ultimate degree of success that this event and the International Year has provided. We must on Monday, and you can relax Saturday and Sunday. We should continue to grow the cooperative economy. We've got to spread the message that it is possible to pursue both economic viability and social responsibility at the same time. That we're the future, that we're the mainstream, and the model preferred by the people. A challenge I know for us all, but one which I know we're more than able to meet. I don't think we should, as some research has shown, that about every 10 years we say, now it's our moment, because I think we all agree now really is our moment. And it really is time that we grasp the opportunity with both hands. That's what we must do. Finally, I would like to thank again our co-hosts, the ICA, and of course the Cooperative Group, our members, and perhaps most of all our wonderful staff, who I'm sure I've looked after you all week. And without naming names, because they'll only get embarrassed, two wonderful people really, one from Co-op Group and one in fact from Cooperatives UK. They've worked tirelessly, I can assure you. So they know who they are, and they know how much we appreciate it. I should also really mention the interpreters who very rarely, and that's thrown them, get a look in. So I think we should really thank them because they really have assisted the whole thing. And then finally, perhaps to those wonderful volunteers, the new Great British thing, it appears. So they have been absolutely wonderful, I'm sure you agree. Smiling, happy, our volunteers. And then finally, you'll be pleased to know, I just wanted to thank all of you. Thank you for your participation. Without you, well, we'll have all been very lonely for a start. But thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've certainly enjoyed having you. And as I say, have a safe journey home. But many, many thanks indeed. Thank you very much.
And now, Dame Pauline Green is going to say a few words.
Just very briefly, colleagues, I just want to reiterate David's thanks to everybody. He's gone through the list, and I don't want to repeat them, but I would add a particular thank to all these people in the red T-shirts who've done such a great job at showing us around. Thank you so much. We're very, very grateful. And it's that sort of thing that actually makes an organised event like this work so beautifully. And you've done it with such humour and goodwill, and we're very, very grateful. You know, I've seen today during the day people, members of the public coming in, and I've seen conversations going on between people who are here working, including the guys and girls in the red T-shirts, but others as well, just talking to people about what's going on here. What is this co-op movement? And I think it's been fabulous to see that interaction between the youngsters, the older people, and the staff explaining. And they're absolutely quizzical looks of, well, we didn't know about this. It's just been essentially a fabulous occasion that has really exceeded every expectation I think we had for it. And a great big thank you to everyone who's been concerned with it. But you know, as we stand here, 25 million young people in Europe alone are out of work. 25 million people, that's the size of a medium-sized European country, out of work. And we have to be able to do something about that. We have to be able to react to that sort of situation and give them some hope and engagement in their economic environment. Because otherwise their hopes and aspirations will be completely crushed. And what a disaster that would be for all of our future and for the future of the planet. So we have to work together and engage those people in our movement and help to give them a future. And this isn't a dream. I was actually interviewed by the BBC, and the journalist who was talking to me when I was trying to describe that we want to change the global economy, we want to diversify it, we want it to have a real look at a member-owned business that puts people at its centre of economic decision-making. And she said, yes, 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 it's all very well, but it's idealistic. And I've said that to you before this week, but I was really, for the first time in my life in an interview, nearly lost my temper. Because, you know, you cannot do that. When 1 billion people across the world are members of cooperatives, 1 billion people cannot be wrong. They can't. And they join because it means something to them and their families. They are not starry-eyed idealists. They are realists. And our movement across the world is based on the real economy. And, you know, we have a fantastic network. You've seen the network here in the businesses, big, small. You've seen the crowds of people. We had about 800 international guests here. And if you think that that's the representation of people from all over the world, it's you know, when I think there were 2,800 people only 3 weeks ago in Quebec City for the Desjardins World Economic Cooperative Summit, and yet here we had another 10,000 people coming through the doors. And you think about the number of cooperative businesses that have engaged in these two very public-facing events. So we have an extraordinary network, both of businesses, large and small, and of people. Our real challenge, colleagues, is to liberate that network and make it work for us across the world, because that's the way we're going to do what we need to do to fulfill the real ambition of our blueprint for a cooperative decade. We have to make that network work for us to continue the momentum of this fantastic year given to us by the United Nations. A very, very rich year for us it's proved to be in terms of content, in terms of engagement. I can't tell you how exciting it's been. So let's get on with it. Let's go and fulfill the ambition in the blueprint. Let's go on and grow our business. Let's help more and more families, more and more young people to engage in this movement, to take those that are suffering and under stress out of that stress, to ensure that we're working for a better world and we can build it. We know we can. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, all of you.
And that wraps everything up. If you could just give a round of applause as well to our panel, including Dame Pauline, just for that. Oh, is there? I didn't know about that. Apparently that's not it. I'm now going to do a party political no, I'm not. We're going to have a video, apparently, and I'm not entirely sure what the...
It's a closing event video?
Yeah.
Bits of the week. Let's see it. I hope it's coming up. Reach in every corner of this globe. Welcome here to the International Year of Cooperatives ICA Expo, and I'm delighted to say the Expo is now open.
At a time when the world needs balance, I'm convinced that the cooperative and mutualist model is just what we need.
While the capitalist society allows for businesses to choose how they will operate, it also offers a duty, an obligation for consumers to support businesses whose values echo their own.
Humanity at work. So we are giving and we are showing to the world that it's possible to work in a factory, all of us being workers, and we can participate, and all of us being owners.
With the ethical use of finance, using finance for good purposes.
And fill a void. And it's something that will, I think, resonate with ordinary people because they have trust in cooperatives, and I think they've certainly lost trust in large organizations.
This is people's lives as well, helping other countries move on.
A virtual cycle of local production and local consumption. Cooperatives can play a very important role on this hunger combat.
By the end of this decade, we can be the fastest growing form of enterprise in the world.
Cuando nos atrevemos a discutir después de una gran reflexión y de una consulta muy amplia en todo el sector cooperativo mundial, de que tenemos que atrevernos a decirle al mundo que somos una solución real, posible y necesaria para solucionar parte de los graves problemas que afectan sobre todo al sistema financiero y de interrelación empresarial en estos momentos.
We have to be as efficient as they are, but we also have to ensure that we are contributing to society.
Nous sommes ici en Angleterre parce qu'on a une très longue tradition de coopération et on veut vraiment être présent dans cette année internationale des coopératives.
Well, this has really surpassed all of our expectations. This has just been phenomenal. We had thousands of people together in Manchester. This is, we believe, the largest gathering of cooperators in decades.
So many of the visitors aren't traditional cooperators. They are people who are members of the public, there's young families here, and it's so wonderful to see that other people, other than elected members, actually are starting to understand that the co-op really offers a compelling alternative.
To see people interacting with the space and wondering and exploring and finding out a bit more about the cooperative movement.
I would say it's magical.
We've had people of all ages coming through and from right across the world as well. I think it's sort of shown us who we are, and it's also shown us who we can be. Cooperatives have got much more of a sense of confidence now. This year and this event has shown that we also have purpose. We are ambitious for what we can do.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and for your questions, and also for the people who were holding up those boards with the numbers on for quite a long time there. Hope your arms are all right. If you could just make sure anyone with headsets hands them back in on your way out. Don't take them home. I don't think it'll help you much, to be honest. And I think if you could, I think we're going to leave row by row, so rather than all running for the door, if you could just wait your turn and someone will come and help you out. And that's it.
Thank you.
Our disability is not a problem.
This is not just for us. It's for the community. It's for our sector, for our family.
Pero nosotros no vamos fuera con la intención de explotar. Lo único valor que tenemos somos las personas y la posibilidad de hacer ese trabajo en común.
Alors c'est vrai que le modèle coopératif, l'avantage que nous avons comparé à d'autres entreprises, c'est qu'on a des salariés qui sont réellement motivés.
Vi tror på enkelheten och robustheten och att människor får vara med och bidra till ett hållbart samhälle ur ett ekonomiskt och socialt perspektiv.
We are in a cooperative. It is very easy for consumers and the buyers to visit and have a discussion with the farmers.